If you think that Rome has been invincible since forever, get ready to discover the real story behind the most stubborn enemies the empire ever faced. This is the moment to travel to the heart of a hidden story, marked by a people who dared to challenge the giant of their time. The Samnites were not mere antagonists of Rome. They were a living symbol of courage and determination. Their journey is a reminder that the pages of great books do not always honor those who offered the most tenacious resistance. Here, Roman grandeur meets an unexpected strength, capable of leaving deep scars in Roman wars that have become legend. If you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the upcoming videos. The depth of this narrative lies in an almost invisible pain. For centuries, the legacy of the Samnites was silenced by official versions that glorified the victors. This void awakens the desire to understand who these people were that lived to resist, fight and maintain their pride even in the face of Rome's relentless expansion. It is in this search for meaning that a connection with the viewer emerges, inviting them to reflect on how history is shaped not only by triumphs, but also by voices that refuse to be silenced. By diving into this epic, a solution is proposed to illuminate these little-known chapters and reveal how the Samnites shaped the course of the Roman wars, leaving marks that endure to this day. Each step of this journey will bring unexpected knowledge, hidden inspiration, and a surprising lesson for those willing to look beyond the obvious. And at this point begins the true saga of a people who never gave up on defending their identity. The Samnites stood out for inhabiting a mountainous region known as Samnium, located in central southern Italy. While other Italic populations sought flatter or more accessible areas, they preferred the rugged geography that granted them natural protection. Their villages were isolated, facilitating the autonomy of each tribe, but making political organization a constant challenge. Nevertheless, these tribes readily united when threatened by external enemies, reflecting a sense of collective identity rooted in the land they occupied. The strategic location in mountainous areas not only shaped the character of this people, but also their way of waging war. This is because ambushes and surprise attacks were fundamental parts of their defense tactics. In contrast to the rigid formations of the Roman armies, the Samnites adopted more fluid methods, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. On certain occasions, they limited the adversary's advance by blocking passages and narrowing valleys, demonstrating a military genius often unrecognized by the official narrative that typically exalts only the glories of Rome. In addition to strategy, there was a mentality forged by the need for survival. The lack of a centralized government made coordination difficult, but it also granted freedom to the tribes to decide their own policies of alliance or war. Intriguingly, this tribal model proved so resilient that even after Rome ascended as the dominant power, the Samnites continued to maintain a degree of independence in their internal organization. This stance reflected an ancestral pride, always ready to boil over at any attempt of subjugation. The tensions that arose between the Samnites and other peoples, especially the Romans, acted as triggers for these tribes to unite. In these moments, the feeling of being Samnite emerged as a cohesive force, capable of uniting different leaders around a greater objective, defending the land and honor of their people. It is admirable to see how this notion of identity resisted various Roman advances, attempting to undermine the internal cohesion of the Samnites by offering agreements to specific leaders or provoking tribal rivalries. It is also important to note that the Samnites did not limit themselves to fighting Rome. At various times, they faced and negotiated with other Italic, Greek, and even Etruscan groups. This multiplicity of conflicts and alliances left a complex cultural legacy in which they absorbed external influences to strengthen themselves while not giving up on their fundamental traditions. In this sense, each clash not only defined the course of their battles, but renewed their impetus to remain firm in their beliefs and ways of life. Delving into the history of the Samnites means understanding that behind every treaty of peace or every battle, there was a core set of values that kept them united. From this point, it is interesting to explore how the Samnite way of life and culture made it possible to sustain such persistence in the face of an ever-expanding and vigorous Roman Republic. Samnite society was marked by customs and traditions that defined their internal and external relations. They spoke Oscan, an Italic language that, although it did not gain the same prominence as Latin, was essential for unifying the tribes and preserving their identity. The use of this language indicated a deep connection with their ancestry, transmitting legends, rites, and knowledge from generation to generation, which was fundamental for a people whose political organization did not rely on large cities or centralized institutions. A unique point in Samnite culture was their animistic religiosity. Many believed in spirits that inhabited nature, manifesting themselves in sacred groves, hot springs, or isolated mountains. Rituals, therefore, focused on harmony with the environment and the quest for spiritual protection. Interestingly, this worldview contrasted with Roman religiosity, which involved a plethora of anthropomorphic gods strongly associated with the civic structure. In the Samnites, devotion was more directly related to the surrounding environment, reinforcing their cultural independence. A significant highlight is the tradition of ver sacrum, sacred spring. In times of overpopulation or crisis, the youth were consecrated to the gods and sent to colonize new lands. This custom, narrated in various ancient sources, helped avoid internal disputes over resources and allowed the Samnites to expand their territory. Although intriguing, this ritual also explained part of their warlike inclination, as the quest for new areas involved clashes with neighboring peoples and inevitably inserted them into the larger stage of Roman wars. The absorption of Greek and Etruscan influences occurred especially in matters of art, architecture, and certain religious practices. However, even while coming into contact with foreign ideas, the Samnites preserved their combative essence. They had a way of life that valued honor and courage in battle, something symbolized by adornments and armors that, on some occasions, combined Greek styles with tribal elements. This cultural hybridity proved useful, as the stylized helmets and shields were both practical and representative of their multifaceted identity. Within the social structure, extended families played a fundamental role. It was common for large clans, united by blood ties, to form the basis for the organization of larger tribes. In these families, elders decided on issues like marriages, local alliances, and land sharing. The experience of those who had survived battles and faced challenges was highly valued, ensuring, in a way, an effective transmission of essential knowledge for the continuity of the group. Studying Samnite society and culture reveals how complex the roots of this civilization were. The coexistence with other traditions and the ability to adapt to the circumstances of the moment made them not only formidable warriors, but also masters of the art of negotiation. And it is precisely this mix of firmness and flexibility that reveals the paths that led to decisive clashes with various peoples, including the famous Greek armies in the region of Magna Graecia. The rivalry with the Etruscans largely arose from geographic proximity and the competition for fertile territories in Campania, which offered economic and strategic possibilities. For a period, the Samnites and Etruscans interacted through cultural exchanges, but tensions built up as each sought to expand their influence. While it is common to remember only the conflicts of both with Rome, the mutual rivalries between these two civilizations also shaped the destiny of the Italian peninsula. In their relationship with the Greeks of Magna Graecia, a curious phenomenon was observed. First, there was commercial interaction and absorption of cultural elements, especially during the time when Greek cities flourished in the southern peninsula. However, the Samnite expansions sought access to the sea and important urban centers, resulting in the conquest of areas like Naples. This dynamic created a hybrid society where contact with Hellenic refinement combined with the martial ferocity of the Samnites. Alongside this, there were also misunderstandings with other Italic peoples such as Latins, Umbrians, and Volscians. These confrontations varied between alliance and war. In some cases, the Samnites established temporary agreements against a common enemy. In others, they even captured cities and imposed their own military presence. This complex scenario illustrates that the Italian territory was not a uniform bloc and that multiple identities coexisted, sometimes supporting each other, sometimes repelling one another. A remarkable curiosity is that over the years, Samnite diplomacy demonstrated a certain degree of sophistication. Their leaders, even without a centralized system, understood the need to negotiate treaties and ceasefires. Each tribe had its own way of conducting agreements, and part of the Samnites' reputation was built on the reliability, or lack thereof, of these negotiations. Throughout various historical passages, the Romans were surprised by the persuasive abilities of Samnite tribal leaders who avoided larger conflicts when it was advantageous, but did not hesitate to return to the battlefield at the opportune moment. These early conflicts helped shape the image of the Samnites as a warrior people, but also shrewd. Their reputation for ambushes and surprise strategies spread, leading potential enemies to fear Samnite resilience. The mountainous terrain of Samnium served as an almost impregnable refuge, making prolonged sieges difficult. This factor would prove decisive when Rome, driven by its expansionist hunger, decided to impose its laws and customs on the entire peninsula. By this point, an uncertain future was already taking shape. While maintaining localized conflicts, the Samnites observed the constant growth of Rome and realized that a more intense clash was inevitable. Regional battles seemed to be mere rehearsals for something much greater, something that would completely reshape the nature of warfare and resistance. The confrontation between Samnites and Rome reached epic proportions over 3 great wars, each driven by distinct interests and resulting in profound consequences for the political configuration of the Italian peninsula. The First Samnite War, 343–341 BC, emerged from friction over Campania, an economically attractive and fertile region. It was in this initial clash that Rome, led by determined generals, made its presence felt at the Battle of Mount Gorus. Despite Samnite bravery, Roman might prevailed, culminating in a peace treaty that kept Samnium independent while granting the Republic control over the coveted Campania. As the years passed, the Romans expanded their borders southward into Italy, leading to the Second Samnite War, 326–304 BC. During this period, one of Rome's most humiliating moments occurred, the Battle of the Caudine Forks, 321 BC. The Samnites surprised the Roman legions in a masterful ambush, forcing them into a humiliating surrender under the dreaded yoke of spears. This event shook the confidence of the Roman army and demonstrated the Samnites' cunning in utilizing the terrain to their advantage. However, Rome's retaliation was swift. The construction of the Appian Way expedited troop movements, and the growing military pressure culminated in the Battle of Bovianum, 305 BC, where the Samnites suffered significant defeats. The Third Samnite War, 298–290 BC, revealed the Samnites' increasing desperation as they sought coalitions with Etruscans, Gauls, and Umbrians to halt the Roman advance. In this context, the Battle of Sentinum, 295 BC, stands out as one of the most significant in the history of the peninsula before the rise of the Roman Empire. Samnite boldness confronted Roman discipline, and the heroic death of Consul Publius Decius Mus in an act of devotio became a symbolic marker of the conflict. Rome's victory solidified its dominance over a large part of Italy, leaving the Samnites in a position of political vassalage, though not completely subjugated. In spirit, a fascinating aspect of these wars is how Samnite resilience disturbed Roman confidence. Despite Rome's power growing with each battle, these campaigns dragged on far longer than any Roman general could have imagined. Many leaders regarded the Samnites as a greater obstacle than nations that would appear later, showcasing the complexity of this adversary, which did not easily bend to surrender pacts. Moreover, the Samnite Wars spurred tactical innovations within the Roman armies. The effort to circumvent Samnite ambushes and break through the natural defenses of the mountains led Rome to refine its formations, supply routes, and communication structures. Major military roads, such as the Appian Way, were constructed not only to defeat the Samnites, but also to prevent new internal insurrections and later organized conquests outside the peninsula. This legacy extended far beyond local conflicts, contributing to the global expansion of Rome in the following decades. This series of wars left lasting marks on how Rome dealt with peoples considered rebellious. However, the formal end of the three wars did not signify the end of Samnite resistance. Their tribes continued to rise when opportunities arose, demonstrating that military submission did not equate to the surrender of their ideals. The inclination to resist did not fade even when Rome appeared to have total control over the Italian peninsula. In the Pyrrhic War, 280–275 BC, the Samnites allied with King Pyrrhus of Epirus in attempts to curb Roman expansion. The idea of confronting Rome alongside a skilled strategist from the Greek world revitalized these warriors. Battles such as Heraclea and Asculum emerged on the horizon, and although Pyrrhus's campaign is often remembered as a failure, the Samnites once again showed how they could seize opportunities to rise up. During the Second Punic War, 218–201 BC, another occasion arose to challenge Roman power. With Hannibal's surprising victory at Cannae, 216 BC, many Italic peoples saw the possibility of liberating themselves from Rome, and the Samnites did not hesitate to ally with Carthage. Hope revived, and once again the Samnite flag of resistance was raised. Although in the end, Rome triumphed over Carthage, Samnite courage demonstrated to the world that this people would not give up, even after successive defeats and reprisals. Years later, the Social War, 91–88 BC, provided another opportunity for revolt. Fed up with the lack of rights, various Italic peoples demanded full Roman citizenship. The Samnites were among the most significant supporters of this rebellion, fighting determinedly for political equality within a system that increasingly favored the Roman elite. Although the war was one of the most devastating conflicts within Roman territory, they nearly managed to seize the capital itself. The final defeat, however, reinforced Roman brutality in punishing rebels. The rebellious spirit of the Samnites did not fade. During the Roman civil wars, 82 BC, when Marius and Sulla vied for power, the Samnites saw another opening. Aligning with Marius's supporters, they once again attempted to confront the Roman system. The Battle of the Colline Gate, 82 BC, symbolized the ultimate act of bravery, where the Samnites fought without retreat. In the end, Sulla ordered a massacre, devastating Samnium and leaving the region in ruins. Nevertheless, the image of this people who insisted on rising up resonated as a warning. The will to fight was greater than any external imposition. With each assault, the Samnites paid a high price, but their spirit did not falter. Often they lost in military terms, but gained a place in the collective memory as a symbol of persistence. The phrase, "the people who never surrendered," makes perfect sense when studying this history of uprisings. At certain moments, Rome regarded them as a thorn in its side, as even when weakened, they managed to challenge the more experienced legions and undermine the sense of security within Roman borders. The continuation of these rebellions over the centuries suggests that there was something fundamental in the Samnite soul. Perhaps it was the deep-rooted notion of independence that the tribes cultivated, or the ancestral memory that the land and freedom were goods worth any sacrifice. What matters is that even after formal submission, they never remained inert under Roman yoke. That flame of revolt had definitive consequences for the eventual fate of Samnium and its people. The aversion that Sulla held against the Samnites, laid bare in the Battle of the Colline Gate, sealed the fate of Samnium. The Roman general, who would become dictator, saw them as a permanent threat. Thus he ordered relentless repression, destroying cities, villages, and any remaining points of resistance. Many warriors were executed, and entire families found themselves homeless. Within a few years, the landscape of Samnium underwent an irreversible transformation, erasing physical traces of a millenary culture. Without territories and autonomy, the life of the Samnites gradually dissolved. Roman roads began to cross the ancient mountain routes where they had once planned ambushes. The introduction of Roman colonies on ancient Samnite soil brought Latin customs, and over time, the Oscan language gave way to Latin. It was as if A cultural erasure had been carefully orchestrated to make Rome omnipresent, suppressing any vestige of organized resistance. Beyond destruction, a new chapter began to be written, that of assimilation. Some Samnites who survived the massacre began to coexist with Roman colonists, adopting the daily practices and lifestyles of the Republic. The descendants of these families, to varying degrees, fused Samnite and Roman traditions, resulting in a little discussed cultural hybridism. It is within this subtle amalgamation that Samnite heritage can be observed, having silently survived in customs, rituals, and even certain forms of local organization. In the military aspect, the legacy of the Samnites was more explicit. Many of their techniques of attack and defense in mountainous terrains were later incorporated by Roman legions in campaigns outside Italy. The lessons learned from ambushes, rapid movements, and adaptation to the environment echoed in later conflicts, such as the conquests of the Alpine provinces and campaigns in the Iberian Peninsula. Thus, the Samnite heritage contributed to the creation of a more versatile Roman army, which would become the foundation of the vast empire. The Samnites, therefore, left marks that extended beyond their defeats. Although they were virtually eradicated as a political entity, their memory survived in the accounts of Roman historians who, despite being biased, could not ignore the bravery of that people. The awareness that a small mountain community was able to resist Rome's expansionist march